On Sunday, we saw the fall of the House of Assad, a dictatorship that had ruled Syria for over half a century. President Bashar Assad fled his country for Russia, and 48 hours later, we're witnessing the unprecedented scene of an assault on Syria's military infrastructure by the Israeli Air Force, and the Israeli ground forces are moving into Syria as well. The report suggests that the Israeli Air Force has destroyed Syria's Air Force on the ground, its navy in the water, and all its air defense missiles and radars. In fact, Syria's entire conventional military infrastructure has been destroyed. Now, yesterday, Israel told the world that its 1974 agreement with Syria was null and void. But why is Israel carrying out these operations, these unprecedented defanging operations, if you can call them that? What happens to Syria now after the fall of the House of Assad? Will Syria once again become an Islamist paradise with groups like ISIS free to regroup and worse, attract recruits from across the world, including India? Joining me to discuss this are Itai Melchior from Israel, Professor Dipankar Sengupta, and in the studio I have with me my colleague Sumit Chaudhary. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Sumit, you've just returned a few weeks back from Lebanon, and a week is a long time in West Asia. Syria is in completely state of collapse. The Israeli forces are moving freely across Syria. Tell us what your sources are telling you right now from the ground in Syria.
Well, Sandeep, the condition right now is that the Israeli forces have nearby to the Damascus, about 10 kilometers they have reached to the Damascus, and from last 48 hours, more than 300 airstrikes have been conducted in the different parts, especially into the southern part of Damascus, and their main aim is not only to destroy the air capabilities of Syrian Air Force, but also arms and ammunition depot and their weapon depots. And they are doing all those things because they don't want that all these capabilities, all these weapons should hand it over to all these rebellion groups, and in near future they will going to use all these weapons against Israel. So that's why Israel have moved. But what is more important, that now Israel forces, IDF, have moved from the Golan Heights and they have captured the areas like Dara, Nava and other areas which are known to be the lines from where they have fuel, or where they have give the rasad, or you can the logistic support in the west bank and also into the south sub to the Hezbollah. So that is why the Israeli forces have captured maximum areas, and they have been doing all these preventive actions just so that these weapons and these arms and ammunition should not be handed over to the rebellion groups.
Absolutely, very interesting takes there, Sumit, and I'm absolutely a big fan of your reports from the ground, especially from Lebanon a few weeks back. But over to Itai. Itai, we've seen Israel launch preemptive strikes on nuclear facilities of Iraq in 1981 and in Syria as well in 2007. Explain for us, our viewers, why is the IAF literally destroying Syrian military infrastructure? Syria does not have a navy, it seems. The air defense forces have been destroyed. The ballistic missile forces have been shattered. The air bases have been hit. Military infrastructure has been targeted. What's going on the ground right now?
Yes, so this is a very good question. And let me just unwrap this for your viewers. First of all, it's important to understand that Israel has no claim or wish to conquer any part of Syria. Israel's only problem with Syria in the last couple of decades has been that Syria was taken over by Iran and was used as part of the Iranian ring of fire against Israel,
yes,
being the main throwaway for Iranian weapons and training to take place, and for Hezbollah to regroup and practice. So certainly Syria was not a friend. That said, the border itself with Syria has been Israel's most quiet border. And Israel has always been watching very carefully what is going on there. But since 2011, when the internal conflict broke out in Syria, Israel was mainly watching and here and there targeted strikes against Iranian targets or against supply chain to Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is all changed now.
Yes.
That Syria has more or less collapsed as a country, and we don't know what shape it is going to take now and who is going to have the hand on the steering wheel. Remember that Turkey has been doing similar attacks to what Israel did in the north,
Yes.
also to prevent ammunition and capabilities of falling into the hands of the Kurds, the
Right.
same way that no one in the West wants Islamist groups to have access to chemical weapons. We know Assad had
Yes.
chemical weapons for the sheer fact that he used it against his own civilians.
Yes.
So nobody wants those chemical weapons or other capabilities in the hands of Islamists that no one really knows what their intentions are.
Right.
That said, it's important to understand. I think some of the reports have been exaggerated. My sources tell me that Israeli movement has been into the demilitarized zone, which is
Right.
part of Syria but considered demilitarized, and also taking over the Syrian Hermon mountain,
Yes.
which the Syrian troops had abandoned. Israel has not shot one fire at anyone. There's not been
Yes.
any conflicts, but it has moved into defensive positions to make sure and to deter anybody who has bad ideas, and stating that this is temporarily until we see what is going on.
Yes, absolutely. What is going on? The world is watching as Syria is turning into some kind of a black hole. I'm going to ask Professor Sengupta this. Professor Sengupta, we spoke about what's going on with Syria just yesterday. Explain to our viewers whether Syria today is what, say, Afghanistan was, just before the Taliban took over and just after the Soviet withdrawal in 1996, 95, 96. Is Syria the new black hole of West Asia?
There are parallels. They say history repeats itself, but sometimes it rhymes. Right now, what has happened is negotiations prior to what happened yesterday, I would say, have succeeded. We know negotiations were going on because the Iranians have let us in.
Yes.
It is clear that Assad was told by the Russians that his position was untenable, and he was told this quite some time ago.
Yeah.
And therefore, the Prime Minister he appointed, we now know that HTS have said that they were in consultations with the Prime Minister quite some time ago. So clearly, Assad knew what was going on.
Right.
His wife and children left, and he is also left. His extended family has also left. Now, to that extent, it is successful because we did not see the kind of trapping of Najibullah as we saw in 1992.
Yes.
Now, the other thing is the following. The other silver part is you don't have rival groups of the various factions, various Syrian factions fighting to enter Damascus, as we saw in Kabul in 1992-93, whereby Kabul was completely destroyed.
Right.
If you look at the Kurds in the north, they are, in the Syrian context, satisfied.
Right.
If you look at the Druses in the south, they are also satisfied. They have no urge to go and conquer Damascus.
Right.
This is not a warlord kind of a game which the Syrian opposition is playing.
Right.
Because remember, Syria, much like Afghanistan, is a multi-ethnic state.
Yes.
50% are Arabs, 50% belong to the various other, ethnic linguistic groups, Kurds, Druses included. They have all their regions of influence, and if truth be told, they would be quite happy to remain where they are.
Right.
However, Kurds know this, that an independent Kurdish state to the north would be a red flag where Turks are concerned, Iraq is concerned, and Iran is concerned.
Yes.
They have not tried to ask for an independent Kurdistan or a Rojava at the north.
Right.
What they have said is they want to be part of a multi-ethnic federal Syrian state, and the only person standing between that goal and was Assad. Now Assad has departed. It now remains to be seen how the HTS, which has taken over Damascus, how it behaves.
Right.
There are some good statements in the sense that they have said they will wait for 1.5 years in line with the UN resolutions to consult with other opposition parties as to what sort of state should come about. They have not said that they're going to build an Islamic state. At the same time, they have given a warning to Alawites, who are seen as heretics, that certain practices that they practice are not in consonance with their version of Islam, and they should stop from doing this. So there are some very good points at this point in time. But remember, these are the persons who have taken over Damascus was part of the ISIS.
Yes.
Can the leopard change its spots? I think if a leopard is hit sufficiently hard and for a sufficiently long period of time, it may not be able to change its, it can behave. So let us be hopeful for Syria and let us see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. But interesting observation there, the leopard. Can the leopard change its spots, Sumit? You have Golani, who's an ex-ISIS guy, ex-Al-Qaeda. He says that, no, I'm now a reformed guy. I was, in my youth, I was very rash and I was in Al-Qaeda and ISIS, but now I'm a changed man. You think a leopard will change its spots, or is Syria on its course to becoming an Islamist state and a nightmare to the entire world?
But Sandeep, I think that there are many similarities between Taliban, especially in Afghanistan and Syria. But what is more important, that we have found a direct involvement of Turkey in the government formation in Syria.
Yes.
Jalani may be called a head of HTS, but he has been working on the will of the Turkey. And what is more important, that they have a from 2017, when they turned to be the moderator or modern form of organization, they call themselves reformers. They wanted to fight for the Aleppo and Idlib, but we have seen that they have formed a government which is known as the Salvation Government in Idlib and Aleppo, and they have been working on that. And I think the Prime Minister of the Salvation Government, Mohammed Bashir, I think he will be the face of government, and Jalan will be the person who will be handling, or he will be the supreme leader who can not only accommodate or deploy or execute all the wills of Turkey, Israel and America, but also the supreme leader who can control the government behind the scenes. So I think that the government formation will be entirely different, and I think the direct involvement of Jalani will not be there in government, but he will be controlling the government, same we have seen in Iran, as the supreme leader has been controlling the government.
Or in Afghanistan, where you have Haibatullah Akhundzaza, who's the supreme leader, who's the force behind the government, but he's rarely seen, and he's in the backdrop. And you're saying that Golani isn't unlikely, he's unlikely to actually become the face of the government himself. He's not going to be the prime minister. He's certainly not going to be administering Syria.
See, there are two important things, Sandeep. They need a person who can control the rebellions. There are almost about 26 rebellion groups. They need to consolidate them. They need to take them on a same line, same track. And there is a other part, which is how to run the government on day-to-day basis. So Jalani can handle all the rebellions group. He can consolidate them. He can do all their accommodate their wills and whatever they want. But on the other side, the government should be that they can perform the day-to-day work. They can do something for the local people. They can engage the international or the neighboring countries. I think those two parts cannot be merged together, and that is why I am saying Jalani can handle the rebellion groups. He can handle the military part, and Bashir, who is the prime minister of the Salvation Government from last almost 1 year, he will be the face of the government, and he can handle, because he's a trustworthy guy for Turkey also, for the Jalani also. So he will be the front person who can run the government on day-to-day basis.
Interesting, and that's something that we really will be watching very closely. HTS, what it's like administering Syria after the capture of Syria from the house of Assad. But Itai, the UN has accused Israel of violating this 1974 disengagement agreement with Syria, and of course Israel has said that its military moves over the last 48 hours are limited and temporary, and it's meant to safeguard your positions on the Golan. But explain for us what these limited and temporary moves mean. I mean, is there a point where the Israeli forces will pull back, say if a government takes over in Damascus of the kind that Sumit has just been telling us?
You see, UN resolutions are not something that I will go by. The UN has mostly been wrong about things happening and has actually not been able to prevent any atrocity, not speaking about the civil war with hundreds of thousands of people dead. We just saw now, they found the books in the prisons of dozens of thousands of people executed by the Assad regime, and millions of Syrians who had to flee to Europe and other Middle Eastern countries, including, by the way, to Israel for medical treatment. So really the UN position here I don't think is important. I want to point elsewhere, because you were trying to make a comparison to Afghanistan, and I think the more correct comparison here, sadly, is to Libya, where today we have two Libyas. And the question is, are we going to end up with only two Syrias or with more than two Syrias? Because remember that the Golani camp is backed by Turkey, and I don't think they want the Kurds to have any part of the new regime and leadership. And therefore we may end up in at least two different Syrias.
Right.
Yes, the question is who sits in Damascus and is the official Syria.
Yes.
But I doubt that we'll be seeing one Syria outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And Professor Sengupta, we were talking about this yesterday, of how Syria, the country that we knew, the Syrian Arab Republic, has ceased to exist. And it's actually been on a very thin, wicket for the last couple of years. But now it has literally ceased to exist. There are probably 4 or 5 Syrias, depending on how many groups you're counting. What does this really mean for the rest of the world when you're looking at Syria as having hosted one of the fiercest and the most ferocious terrorist groups ever, ISIS, a decade ago, which controlled a territory the size of the United Kingdom? Are you looking at a return to some kind of a ISIS kind of situation of 2014, where you have new groups that are coming over there, they're existing in this kind of chaos, and who knows, recruiting people from across the world like what happened a decade ago?
In a sense, you've actually handed over power to a mutated form of ISIS,
Right.
with the hope that it is actually better, it's learned its lessons.
Right.
And on the face of it, it appears that may have happened. Okay, only the future will tell. But the fact is, this particular gentleman who has come in does not just have Turkey's help, he also has the help of the United States.
Right.
Will he overshoot his ambitions? Look, the fact remains that he is hemmed in by all sides.
Right.
If he overindulges, basically, risks something, turns adventuristic,
Yes.
the fact is he will get hammered.
Right.
Now, he will get help from the Turks, of course, who would not want the Kurds to achieve a position of salience, even though the Kurds of Syria have made it very clear that they're not asking for an independent state. But then there are other factions, Druzes, etc., and the Alawites are still, Alawites are not spread all over India. They're compacted in the
Yes.
south of Lebanon, bordering Lebanon. So the fact is, if these people overplay their hand, then the United States and Russia might come together and do something unpleasant to them. At
Right.
this point in time, their actions and their words seem to indicate that right now consolidation of power is what they're looking at. Look,
Right.
the division of responsibilities, day-to-day responsibilities being given to Muhammad Bashir, who has some experience in this hand, and the large part of fighting and negotiations being taken upon by Gilani
Yes.
himself, is a sign that there is some sort of rationality and organization in all. Okay, this is, as I repeatedly said, this is something that was the result and outcome of negotiations.
Right.
It was not as chaotic as Libya was. So it is quite possible this gentleman, knowing who he owes his power to, will behave possibly more rationally than players in Libya have behaved.
Right.
But again, as I said, early days, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Early days, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And Syria, the new black hole in West Asia, is a story that's taken the world by storm. And in literally no country in the world that has interests in a peaceful and stable West Asia can afford to take this lying down. And thank you very much, Itai, for joining us this evening. Itai, Professor Sengupta, and of course, my colleague Sumit Chaudhary, who's extensively covered the war in West Asia. That's a story we'll be tracking on the News 9 Plus show.